Hello and welcome to episode 35 of Peace Matters, a podcast on contemporary geopolitics and international relations. Today we're talking about the Cyprus conflict. This island in the eastern Mediterranean has been divided into two parts since the early 1960s, and the unresolved conflict seems to be dormant for now. Whether and how it can be solved today and what role Turkey, the European Union, the United Nations and other international actors play in it is what I discussed with Ahmet Sözen, Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the Eastern Mediterranean University in Famagusta. So, thank you Ahmet that you're here with us after the whole day yesterday of talks and events. Yesterday we spoke about Turkey, today we will speak specifically about Cyprus, and you're an expert very much on this topic, especially when it comes to peace-building efforts, so we will try to discuss this. But maybe before I start with my first question, I just want to give our viewers a short background of the conflict as I understand it, although I'm not that much familiar with it in depth. So, Cyprus is a small island populated by Greek and Turkish communities with a Greek majority, and before 1960 it was a British colony. Since late 19th century until 1960 the island was under the government basically of Britain, and then when it gained its independence there were attempts to find some power sharing arrangements between the Greek community and the Turkish community. But then 3 years later, after independence, intercommunal violence started, and it lasted for over 10 years until Turkey invaded in 1974, basically occupying the northern part of the island, and by this splitting the island into two. And this is sort of the situation that persists today, from my understanding, but maybe you can still update me or correct me if this doesn't fit your narrative, and maybe also say a couple of words on the status quo. Where are we now with this conflict? The island is divided. What is happening there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, by and large, I do agree with your description. Of course, sometimes the terminology we use or each person use might be different because whenever you have a conflict, you have mostly two official narratives of that conflict, one from one side, the other one from the other side. In 1960, when the British withdrew from the island, and Cyprus was not an exception, by the way. In 1960, Great Britain withdrew from many other colonies. It was a time when the destiny of the island of Cyprus would be decided. Who should govern Cyprus? In that, there was historically two opposing national aspirations. One was the Greek aspiration, which they coined the term enosis, which is the union of the island with what they regarded Mother Greece. And as a reaction, the Turkish narrative was taksim in Turkish, which means partitioning of the island, joining one part with Turkey and joining the other part, the Greek Cypriot community to Greece and Turkish Cypriot community to Turkey. In 1960, the three guarantor countries, the two motherland countries, Greece and Turkey, as well as Great Britain, the former colonial master, they came together, they agreed on establishing a bicommunal republic in Cyprus, rather than either union with Greece or partitioning of the island. Instead, it was a bicommunal republic based on power-sharing mechanisms between the two major communities, Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot. So it was a kind of functional federation, not a typical federation because there was no geographical division, but nonetheless the powers and the functions of the state was divided between the two major communities. As you rightly put it, it lived only 3 years, and in 1963 we had the intercommunal clashes with violence, and that led to, a year later, 64, the landing of the UN peacekeeping force in Cyprus, and they have been there since then. In 1974, first there was an attempt by the military regime in Greece to actualize union of the island with Greece and Osis. And this was 5 days later prevented by Turkish military operation. As you see, I use a different terminology than what you do. I think it's more neutral, but anyways, it led to the physical division of the island into two parts. And since the late 1970s, there were two high-level agreements between the leaders of the two communities, the so-called high-level agreements or summit agreements, that, at least on paper, the two communities decided to establish a bizonal, bicommunal federation in Cyprus. And this bizonal, bicommunal federation became the parameters of a solution that has been also endorsed by the international community, the UN foremost in that sense. So since then, we had what we call intercommunal negotiations, on and off, since the 70s, all the way to 2017, Crans-Montana. But before that, I think there was another critical moment in Cyprus, which was before the EU membership. In 2004, there was a UN peace plan, which was produced out of all these decades-long intercommunal negotiations between the two leaders or two communities, which were on and off. They didn't go on uninterrupted, by the way, because sometimes the negotiation, there would be a leader's change, or the intercommunal negotiations would stop for some reason, several months, several years, whatever, a few years, whatever, but they would continue later. Until 2004, there was the first and the last comprehensive solution plan ever being put on the table in front of the two communities. In fact, they negotiated that. It was called the Annan Plan, which got the name of the then Secretary General Kofi Annan. It was a 180 pages long agreement, as well as 10,000 pages long federal laws, as well as constitution of the federation, as well as constitution of each constituent states. But unfortunately, in the referendum, it was rejected by majority of the Greek Cypriots, 76%, though it was supported by 65% of the Turkish Cypriots. So it never came into force. So again, on and off negotiations continued until 2017, where there was also an international Cyprus conference with the inclusion of not just the two Cypriot communities, but also the three guarantor powers, the representatives of the three guarantor powers. But the collapse of the negotiations in Crans-Montana, Switzerland in 2017 was a major watershed. And since then, it's been 8 years, more than 8 years, that we didn't have any formal negotiation.
Yeah.
We did have some informal negotiations, but no formal negotiations because, as the UN Secretary General puts it, there is no common ground or common vision of the two communities as to what is forward. So, long story short, a short answer to your question, today we are in a stalemate in that sense.
Yeah, so what does it stalemate mean actually on the ground? How do these two communities operate? There is a Northern Republic of Cyprus that is not recognized by anyone apart from Turkey, and then there is the Republic of Cyprus, which is under control of the Greek Cypriot community, and which is part of the European Union. So what does this actually mean for people who live in these two communities?
I mean, look, again, I'm going to caricaturize this or maybe oversimplify it. De facto, there has been two states on the ground. One is recognized by the international community, the Republic of Cyprus, which has turned into a de facto Greek Cypriot republic since the end of 1963. It's been 62 years. And then you have some sort of a Turkish Cypriot administration since then, which got into a state in 1983 with a unilateral declaration of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. And as you rightly put it, it's only recognized by one country, Turkey. But in actuality, de facto, it is a state. Simply, it doesn't have recognition. So in that sense, for a very long time, the status quo in Cyprus is based on that you have two states operating independent of each other. And this status quo, in a way, created a kind of comfort zone for each community. And the lack of the solution of the Cyprus problem for so long, in a way, within quotation marks, normalized the situation on the ground. So if you ask to a average Greek Cypriot, let's say 30-year-old Greek Cypriot, specifics about Cyprus problem, he or she wouldn't be able to tell you what it is. Similarly, if you ask about Cyprus problem to a, 30-year-old, again, Turkish Cypriot woman or man, he or she wouldn't tell you the specifics because they were born into that status quo. So what I'm trying to say is that there is no, what a famous scholar once used this terminology, mutually hurting stalemate. We don't have that. I mean, the status quo is not hurting the communities that much to the extent that they would want to solve it. So in a way, the incentive of the average people to solve the Cyprus problem is
low,
eroding year by year.
Yeah.
So this is the situation in that sense.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the existence of the Cyprus problem is causing other problems internationally. It prevents, for example, NATO and EU to have a communication, a formal communication, because Turkey is a member of NATO, but not EU. The Greek Cypriot-dominated Republic of Cyprus is a member of EU, but not NATO. So each one blocks the other one and prevents these two giant organizations, let's say, from communicating with one another.
All right. So it's a sort of a comfortable frozen conflict for the local communities, but it makes international politics a bit more difficult.
But I mean, look, it's not black and white. Maybe I can tell you an anecdote. An Israeli friend of mine who was a former diplomat, ambassador of Israel to Turkey, now he's retired, his name is Alon Liel. He wrote a book, and several months ago he called me, he said, Ahmet, record me a video which I can show during my book launch. How on earth you guys in Cyprus managed to have the continuation of the problem without solving it, but without killing one another, without violence. Lessons for the Israelis to be learned. Now, long story short, it got me to rethink and reevaluate the status quo. our problem, our conflict, unresolved Cyprus conflict, is a model of solution for other parts of the world, you know? So, as a person, as a diehard pro-solution and as a diehard federalist myself, I started evaluating my position on the status quo. I used to think that the status quo is something that is dirty, something that we have to get rid of as soon as possible, something to disdain. But the events in the world in the last few years show me that what we have in Cyprus, the negative peace, lack of violence, is actually something that we need to protect and nourish. I'm not saying that we should keep it unchanged. I'm saying that we should continue struggling to solve the Cyprus problem. But we should be also aware that this frozen conflict, what we have, is also very precious compared to many other conflicts in other parts of the world where, there is violence and people are being killed every one day.
Yeah. So let me ask you about the ongoing negotiations between the two communities. I mean, they are formally ongoing, but apparently there is not that big progress happening there after.
There is no formal conflict, formal negotiations.
Formal negotiations. Okay.
Not in the last 8 years,
okay, then
since
explain,
Montana.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to ask you about. So explain me what happens now, since as far as I understand, the UN appointed a new special representative to the conflict who is she's traveled.
A personal envoy.
A personal envoy.
Yeah, the former foreign minister of Colombia, Maria Holguin.
Yeah. So she tried to somehow revive these negotiations and bring the conflict parties to sit together and talk. Yeah. Where is it going and how far, what does it mean basically? I think actually the two leaders of the two communities met in New York at the General Assembly this September.
A few times in New York, in Geneva. Each year they travel for this informal tripartite or five-partite meetings. Tripartite meaning two leaders together with the UN Secretary General. When we say five-partite, it also includes the guarantor powers, representatives. This has been going on for the last few years. It's not obviously going anywhere because we haven't seen these informal dinners or informal gatherings leading to any kind of resumption of formal negotiations. So in that sense, as I pointed out, it's a stalemate.
Yeah. So why is it a stalemate? Is it more out of these pragmatic reasons that it just suits everyone, or is there also some ideological underpinning?
Oh, there are a lot of different dynamics here. There are both local dynamics as well as regional and global dynamics. Currently, for example, you must be familiar with my evaluation of the global systemic changes that I was talking about during the 2025 Vienna Peace and Security talks, that we are going through a global systemic shift of power. And in this situation, the post-Cold War American-led so-called global, so-called liberal unipolar system is evolving into some sort of multipolar world. Okay. Now, what is happening is that the values and the norms of the previous system are now in flux. That's why we have been witnessing all these events like the Russian invasion of Ukraine or the war in Gaza, or some call it genocide in Gaza. I hope that the new peace initiative at least holds. But such things are possible due to the fact that the rules and the norms of the previous system are in flux, and that gives an opportunity a space for some of the countries to go outside of international law and internationally established principles and norms and act differently. So we are going through that system. That system, in a way, provides countries like Turkey the luxury of not being flexible on Cyprus or using Cyprus as a trump card for a future bargaining. So in that sense, Turkey found this new situation on the global level to assert a different policy on Cyprus. Rather than supporting a bizonal, bicommunal federation, Turkey chose, together with the Turkish Cypriot leadership, two-state solution in Cyprus, which is outside of the UN parameters for a solution, which I've described at the beginning of our discussion today. So that's one part. The other part, of course, the Turkish side got, to use layman's term, sick and tired of the intransigence of the Greek Cypriot leadership's position on Cyprus. 2004, as I said, the first and the last comprehensive solution plan on the table, rejected by a majority of Greek Cypriots. And in 2017, where you had almost 2 years of negotiations collapsed due to the Greek Cypriot leadership's leaving the table, Mr. Anastasiadis, in 2017. So this created a frustration and an exhaustion on the Turkish foreign policymakers. And they started evaluating the situation. If the Greek Cypriot side is not ready to share power with Turkish Cypriots in a federation, why should we bother, supporting a federal solution in Cyprus? So there are, as you see, a lot of factors, but there are also inside Cyprus vested interests to the continuation of the status quo. You have all these businesses or interest groups on both sides of the UN divide. For example, hoteliers in the Greek Cypriot side. For example, maybe the constructors of buildings and whatnot on the Turkish Cypriot side, who are happy with the existing status quo. And all these are factors in the continuation of the Cyprus problem.
Yeah. I traveled to Cyprus in summer and spoke to many people on both sides, and a couple of times the argument was made that basically the two communities are conducting their negotiations, a lack of negotiations, in a way that they know that if one side agrees to something, they're sure to know that the other side will reject it. So basically there is kind of this tacit understanding that it will not move anywhere, and we can be happy about it, sort of, as a way.
Maybe, but look, there is this principle in the UN-led negotiations, which took place from the 70s all the way to almost 2017, that the principle was that nothing is agreed until we agree on everything. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if the two sides agree on the power sharing dossier, what will be the structure of the future executive, legislative, and the judiciary branches of the federal government, but they haven't agreed on what's going to happen to the disputed property that people need to move away from their homes in 1963 and 1974. If the two sides do not agree on the property issue, then they don't mean that they agree on the power sharing. So that is also restrictive. The two sides in the negotiations cannot agree on something, finish it, and then that is binding, they go to the next thing. No. The principle is that they need to agree on every single thing on 6 dossiers. Governance and power sharing, economic issues, EU-related issues, property, territory, and security and guarantees. So that's a tall order. So that gives sides, this principle gives sides to pull out from the negotiations anytime without paying any price. It's not binding. You understand what I'm saying? So that's one shortage, or that's one restriction on the negotiation. The other one, in my opinion, is the role of the UN in Cyprus. The role of the UN, the mission or the mandate of the UN in Cyprus since 1965. By the way, since the stationing of the peacekeepers 64 to 65, 1 year, there was a mediator in Cyprus appointed by the UN. But after 1965, since then, the UN's mandate in Cyprus is called Mission of Good Offices. And ask yourself, what is Mission of Good Offices? It doesn't mean mediation. It's less than mediation. You know what it is? It means that the UN has the competence and the function of facilitating the dialogue, providing the negotiation venue, the building, the crappy coffee and food, and believe me, it's crappy, I've been there, and take notes. That's it. The UN cannot even put bridging proposals of the two extreme positions of the two sides on the table. So in that sense, the UN's role in Cyprus is very restricted. It's not even mediation. It's more like facilitation of the dialogue. So that's also very problematic,
right,
which gives a lot of room to the two leaders who are regarded as the chief negotiators of their communities to, whenever they don't like something, to pull out of the negotiations without paying any price because there's nothing binding there.
Right. Let me ask you about another international actor, and this is the European Union. So the Republic of Cyprus joined the European Union in 2004, even though the Annan Plan failed, although initially it was kind of made a precondition for the unification of Cyprus was a precondition for Cyprus joining the European Union.
Yeah, but that's an area that we can talk hours and hours.
Yeah, so
we
so
don't
let
want to
me
get into detail, but
yeah,
let me tell you this. You're right that EU at the beginning thought that solving the Cyprus problem was a precondition of Cyprus's EU membership. That was the case if Cyprus problem was resolved before April 2003. Why April 2003? Because in April 2003, the Treaty of Accession was signed by the candidate countries, 10 of them. Cyprus, Malta, the three Baltics, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and Slovenia. Now, the Cyprus problem was not resolved before April 2003. So it was the Greek Cypriot leader, Mr. Tassos Papadopoulos, who signed the Treaty of Accession alone on behalf of the whole Cyprus. The idea was to solve the Cyprus problem and get the Greek and Turkish Cypriot leaders to sign the Treaty of Accession together. So they signed it, and from April 2003 to April 2004, or to May 2004, was a time of formality to confirm the signatures in the parliaments of the candidate countries. So when Cyprus signed it in 2003, it was destined to become a member in 1st of May 2004. So the Republic of Cyprus, or the Greek Cypriot-led Republic of Cyprus, had no incentive left after signing the Treaty of Accession to share power with Turkish Cypriots and sign a deal. So they opted to become a member themselves, to use EU membership as a leverage
So in a way, it wasn't quite smart, the sequencing of those
Absolutely.
signatures and events.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But in any case, my question concerned more about the implications of what it is there is now on the ground for the
Okay, I'll tell you what it is on the ground. Yeah.
So the thing is that the Republic of Cyprus is now part of the European Union, and then there is a Turkish part of the island which is not part of the EU, or officially not. What is the official formulation? That the acquis does not cover the northern part of the island, but formally it's also a part of the European Union. And
geographically, it's part of the EU,
and
but the acquis communautaire is suspended in the northern part of Cyprus until a solution.
Exactly. So.
But not exactly. I'll tell you.
Does it make my
the
question?
The devil is in the detail.
Exactly. Does it make things more complicated, or does it also contribute the fact that there is like kind of partial accession of the island of Cyprus to the European Union? Because on the one hand, you of course have all the Turkish Cypriots also have European Union passports.
Not all of them, but majority. Yeah, right.
Kind of positive.
But on an individual level, not on a community level. In any case. You're right. Look, there is this Protocol 10 attached to the Treaty of Accession, where the EU had to decide and wrote down how the EU is going to handle the northern part of Cyprus, or the Turkish Cypriot community. Now, in the Protocol 10, how is the Turkish Cypriots or Turkish Cypriot side is described? Any ideas? It doesn't say TRNC.
Because you already told it to me. It's 21 words of unrecognized something.
No,
so basically
there's nothing even unrecognized. Instead of calling it TRNC within quotation marks or without quotation marks, or North Cyprus or Northern Cyprus or Turkish Cypriot controlled area, not even that. Not even the word Turkish Cypriots. The area in the northern part of Cyprus, which you also visited, is called or described with 21 words. Those areas of the Republic of Cyprus in which the government of the Republic of Cyprus does not exercise effective control. Do you see anything about northern part of Cyprus? Anything about Turkish Cypriots? Anything about community? No. This is a very narrow, legalistic way of looking at Turkish Cypriots and Turkish Cypriot community, I'm afraid. So, due to that, in a way, the EU locked itself into this very narrow way of dealing with Turkish Cypriots. So, the EU officials usually do not engage with the Turkish Cypriot officials. They don't have to recognize the TRNC in order to engage with them, by the way. So instead, the EU usually deal with what they call civil society organizations. I'm putting it within quotation marks because not every civil society in Cyprus is genuine civil society. There is also artificial civil society organizations which were created to grab some of the EU or UNDP or whatever money, just like the cases in Kosovo or Bosnia or any other places where there are international funding and whatnot. So obviously, it's not really helping. To direct you to direct answer to your question, the EU involvement in Cyprus, unfortunately, so far didn't provide much hope, but rather made the division on the ground even more concrete by this very narrow way of treating the northern part of Cyprus or engaging Turkish Cypriots.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe since I asked about the EU, I will also ask about Turkey and the role that, because you already alluded to the role that Turkey is playing, it controls also the current, Turkish Cypriot authorities, and there is an election coming in 4 days, I think.
Yeah, this Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. So my question actually right now does not concern the political part, but more the demographic situation on the island, and especially in the north. How does the demography change there, and what does it mean also for the for the solution for the Cyprus problem? Yeah, because of also the strong influence that Turkey exerts and how it uses this part of the island.
Look, I mean, to say a few things about Turkey. Turkey is a very important actor in Cyprus. That without Turkey's, let's say, changing its position, or without Turkey's becoming more flexible on Cyprus problem, you cannot really solve Cyprus problem. But Turkey's changing its position from supporting two-state to a federal solution in itself is not enough, because the Greek Cypriot political elite needs to be also aligned, meaning that they need to also endorse a solution based on power sharing with Turkish Cypriots in political equality, and they are not ready for it. So there are these two important actors, Turkey and the Greek Cypriot political elite or leadership, that needs to be more flexible. I mean, these are two major keys, and then of course you need all these regional and whatever actors pushing or encouraging a solution. I don't know, maybe somebody like Trump, who's imposed a Gaza plan, might impose a Cyprus plan. Joke aside. Now, coming back to your question about demographic changes. In both sides of the Cyprus divide, there are more and more demographic changes. People outside of Cyprus are coming to live in Cyprus on both sides because it is attractive. Food-wise, weather-wise, it's a Mediterranean life, laid back and whatnot. So, but I think currently the northern part is also attractive to a lot of people, simply because it is not part of the EU. So it's easier to get into it. So the recent years, we have more and more Russians, more and more Ukrainians, more and more Israelis, Iranians, and
of course, Turks.
People from other countries, mostly global south, Nigeria, Iran, whatnot, who come to, for example, study in the northern part of Cyprus, and then they prefer to stay.
And what about the Turks that come from Turkey? How do they change the demography of Greek Cypriot Turks, so to say? Because these are very close communities, but at the same time, they're like, it's Greek Cypriot Turks, and then there are Turkish Turks, and they're mixing on Cyprus.
Yeah.
What does it mean
the
for
Turkish,
the demography?
what you call Turkish settlers, a lot of people call Turkish immigrants. They first came to Cyprus in the 70s, after the war in 74. There was a conscious effort in 75, especially to bring some workers to work in the fields and the factories that once belonged to Greek Cypriots. But after that, the migration towards Cyprus from Turkey was more natural, because for a long time, the salaries and the working conditions in the northern part of Cyprus was much better than Turkey. So it was attractive for Turkish citizens to come and work and settle down. So a lot of Turkish settlers or immigrants came and settled in Cyprus. And moreover, they also started having marriages with Turkish Cypriots. So now we have more of a interethnic marriages. So now we have second and third generations. It's almost impossible to make a distinction and call somebody who's like 18 years old a settler. I mean, what do I call somebody who was born in Cyprus from a mother from Turkey and a father from Cyprus, who was, let's say, born in 1976, who is now how many years old?
Almost 15.
Almost 50 years old. Is he or she a Cypriot or a settler? I mean, I was born and raised in Cyprus myself. I'm 57 years old. I spent 18 years of my life abroad. So that means what? I spent 39 years of my life in Cyprus. And that person spent almost 50 years. Which one of us is more Cypriot, by the way?
Do these people have maybe different political views?
Of course.
In a way, so
Yeah. I mean,
does it make them connected?
This is the thing. There is a stereotyping that, especially Greek Cypriot narrative says Turkish settlers, and they lump together all these thousands of people as if they are homogeneous, that they don't have different political opinion and whatnot, and that they get instruction from one center like this. This is not the case. The island has a power to change people. Some years ago we had a public opinion poll. We had this scientific study and we measured religiosity of people in Cyprus. Now, the average, let's say, original Turkish Cypriots, on a scale of 0 to 10 in religiosity, 10 being very religious and 0, of course, meaning no religious at all. Let's say the average was something like 2, 3 for original Turkish Cypriots. Those people who came from Turkey directly and settled in Cyprus, the average was about 5, 6. But the children of those who come from Turkey, who were born in Cyprus, their religiosity was something like 3, 4. What does this tell us? This tells us that the island does have this transformative capacity of the lifestyle and the laid-backness of the Mediterranean life and whatnot is shaping people. And, for example, those kids who were born from these Turkish mothers and fathers, when they were taken to their ancestors' villages or towns and whatnot, they feel alienated. Because they got socialized and educated in Cyprus, and it's a different way of life. Just like you have all these, let's say, Gastarbeiters or foreigners, the second and the third generations, who are very difficult to distinguish from the original.
Right.
So, yeah.
Let me move to another important issue, or factor in this whole politics of the island, is the presence of many military bases and many military powers on it. So maybe if you can sketch very quickly what it means also for the conflict resolution efforts. Does it have a direct impact on that?
Yes and no. Look, I mean,
We have
Cyprus.
the Brits, Turkish army.
We have 6 armies in Cyprus.
Can you name them?
Of course I can.
Go ahead.
You have the Turkish army, you have the Greek army, you have the Turkish Cypriot army, you have the Greek Cypriot National Guard, Greek Cypriot army, and then you have the British in their sovereign bases, and then you have the United Nations. About 800 or 900 soldiers from a bunch of different countries, by the way.
Right.
So it's a heavily militarized place. If you look at the number of soldiers in every square mile, it is heavily militarized. But thank God that the soldiers are mostly in their barracks and they're not so visible. I think both sides know that they have a lot to lose if they let all these military stuff to escalate. What I'm talking about here is this. Every year, I think it's like 4 million tourists going to the Greek Cypriot side of the island, maybe more, 4 or 5 million. I lost count of it. And I think on the Turkish Cypriot side, every year there is 1 to 2 million people, tourists coming. And what happens if there is violence breaking out in a touristic place? Do you think that the tourists will rush to that? No, just the opposite. So tourism is one of the biggest chunk of the economic gain on both sides, or the economic sector on both sides, and everybody has a lot to lose if things go south in Cyprus. So I'm hoping that our frozen conflict will remain frozen, though in this day and age, in this age of tectonic changes, no frozen conflict is actually frozen. So that's why at the beginning I said that even the status quo of non-solution, but a peaceful sort of negative peace is something that we need to carefully protect in Cyprus.
Yeah, that's a very nice conclusion, but I would like to ask you one very short question for the end. What could be maybe a more constructive or more helpful role for the European Union in this conflict?
I coined this terminology a couple of years ago when I wrote an article on how to use, for example, energy resources in offshore Cyprus for the benefit of the two countries. I coined the term engagement without recognition, meaning that both the EU as well as the Greek Cypriot side, the Republic of Cyprus, needs to engage with the Turkish Cypriots. Engagement doesn't mean formal recognition. You do cooperation. We have, for example, some technical committees on both sides where members attend from both sides on education, restorational cultural sites and stuff like that, but there is none on environment and energy. And in this day and age, where we are going through climate change, I mean, the two sides are not talking to one another. I mean, and we are living on the very same island. So don't you think that that's an area of potential cooperation, and that the two sides, two communities need to coordinate as to how they are going to protect the environment as well as cope with climate change, especially knowing that Cyprus in its entirety is a tourism destination, that both sides make their living out of it. So that's one area, for example, without a solution, or in the absence of a solution, we definitely need to cooperate. And hopefully cooperate in many other issues that can trigger more, let's say, necessity of solving the Cyprus problem with a comprehensive solution. Okay, there is no, let's say, common vision today for a comprehensive solution, but nonetheless, for God's sakes, there are a lot of issues on the ground that we can cooperate on, that can lead to making the lives of average Greek and Turkish Cypriots much better. The other one is making the crossings much easier by using technology rather than people showing their passports and ID cards, or when they travel with cars, their insurances and whatnot. All these things can be digitalized and it can be more automated.
Right.
So
some
the sky is the limit. We can do a lot of cooperation on many issues. And this will definitely build more trust and confidence between the two sides, and will trigger us towards a comprehensive solution.
Great. I take environmental peace building as another new, very
Absolutely.
progressive way to deal
Absolutely.
with things. Thank you very much, Ahmet.
My pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion and stay tuned for the next episodes.